when you start questioning in one area, it leaks over into other areas. You can't help it because basically at the root of that is your suspicion of orthodoxy or tradition or the status quo. So you start questioning everything. So it can be very traumatic.
You're listening to Make Some Noise podcast, episode number 466 with guest David Hayward. Welcome to Make Some Noise podcast, your guide for strategies, tools, and insight to empower yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Owen, global speaker, entrepreneur, life coach since 2007, and author of 3 books that have been translated into 18 languages and are available in 22 countries. Each week, I'll bring you a guest or a lesson that will help you maximize unshakable confidence, master resilience, and make some noise in your life. You ready? Let's go. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. We are still on the creativity and spirituality theme this year, and we have David Hayward on today. I, of course, found him on TikTok. I feel like most of the guests I'm having this year, I found him on TikTok. He popped up on my For You page a couple of times. I really like what he had to say, and I love this conversation. I can't wait for you to hear it. I wanted to remind you that we have a couple of spots left for our fall retreat here in North Carolina. It's in the beautiful city of Asheville. I've rented this gorgeous house. We all get to stay together. So all of your lodging is included in the retreat, all of your meals, all of your materials, all of the instruction that I will be doing for a few days. And if you want to read more about it, the methodology that we're going over, what I'm actually teaching and facilitating, it's at andreaowen.com/retreat. And all the prices are there for the couple of different rooms that are available. All the information's there, the dates, everything. And the woman that's coming to help me, who's going to be my assistant, her name's Jessica. She was my client in 2015 doing this same work, and she still uses the work. She still raves about it and talks about how she leans on it when she needs to walk through something difficult. And that's really what it is. The whole outline is there on the site. And if you aren't sure, if you're kind of on the fence, you can book a call with me if you want to chat and just do a gut check and just make sure it's the right thing for you. And I'll be really honest with you. You can tell me what's going on in your life. Tell me where your obstacles are, your struggles. And I will tell you if these strategies and tools that you're going to receive at the retreat will help you. And I'm just really excited. I'm excited to see people in person and just get to hug people with consent, of course. So again, andreaowen.com/retreat. All right, let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. In 2010, after 30 years as a pastor, David left his ministry to focus on Naked Pastor and the community that was emerging around it, and now it's his full-time gig. David believes that questions are the answer to authentic growth. It's why he uses words and images to challenge the status quo, deconstruct dogma, and offer hope for those who suffer under it. With a master's in theological studies, as well as diplomas in religious studies and ministry and university teaching, David's no stranger to belief systems. His art expresses the stories and struggles of spiritual refugees and those who question, doubt, or reject the confines of religion. Each piece encourages important conversations and acts as a catalyst for critical thinking. So without further ado, here is David. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I'm excited to have you. I mentioned before we started recording that you're the first guest to come on with this topic. We've had so many different personal development topics. I've been doing this for almost, 2013. So almost 10 years.
Wow.
And no pressure, but you're the first person to come on and talk about this.
Oh, I'm cool with that.
Well, you're kicking us off. I know you won't be the last, but we're doing themes this year on the show, and now we're talking about spirituality and creativity. And as I have found many guests this year on TikTok, and you embody both of those things. And I want to start by, because this is a topic that is brand new to this show, can we start by talking about? Can you give us what your definition of the term deconstruction means? Let's start there.
Sure. So I was reading about deconstruction, this philosophical school that was launched by Derrida in France years ago. So basically, his claim is that there is no such thing as objective truth in a text, that we all come with our own interpretation and so on and so forth. And I was heading to a seminar, a workshop weekend with other pastors, and we were encouraged to read books on deconstruction because they were going to show us how it was wrong. But instead, it had the opposite effect on me and converted me basically to agree. I agree that we all approach everything with our own interpretation. So that when somebody says the Bible says, really what they mean is, I think the Bible says according to my interpretation. And that goes for every text, anything at all, like your typical event, like an accident. Everybody has their own perspectives, their own, interpretation of what happened. So I was a pastor at the time, a minister, and I was pastoring a church at the time. And this sort of started a ball rolling where this would happen back in 2008. I started to talk about deconstruction as a word that I found applicable to my own spiritual journey, where I was questioning everything. Nothing seemed objectively true anymore. And I was really analyzing and taking apart and questioning everything that I believe, right down to the roots. And so deconstruction is basically that. It's like, instead of constructing, you're deconstructing. It's like, instead of building a house, you're actually tearing it down all the way to the foundations, and maybe even digging up the foundations. So that's what I mean by deconstruction. And it can happen in any sphere of your life. Like, people deconstruct their political views, people deconstruct their ideas of relationships, people deconstruct their ideas of sexuality, people deconstruct their ideas of spirituality and religion. And so that's kind of what I specialize in.
Okay. I love that explanation. And so I also interpreted it as deconstruction typically happens when we've been indoctrinated a certain way. Is that fair?
Yeah. Conditioned.
Okay. Yeah. And now that you explained that, I was like, wow, I've gone through deconstruction in many areas of my life.
Yeah.
I didn't realize.
Exactly. Yeah. When you start questioning in one area, it leaks over into other areas. You can't help it, because basically at the root of that is your suspicion of orthodoxy, basically,
right.
or tradition, or the status quo, or the herd.
Exactly.
You start questioning everything. So it can be very traumatic.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said that, because, and it's funny, I'm just putting it together now. So when, this was back in, I think I had just had, my kids were babies. My parents weren't, they weren't very politically conscious. I don't even know if they even voted. They probably did, but they just never talked about it. And then I entered a relationship when I was 17, and that his family, they were very conservative. And so I just belonged to their family, and they were very close family. They protected me. They loved me. They cared about me. I trusted them. And so I adopted their political views without even saying, like, well, what is the other side saying? I'm just curious. Like, what is the argument? I was just told it was stupid. It was dumb, et cetera. It was, the falling apart of the nation. And so when that relationship fell apart, and I started to kind of pick my head up and like, oh, there's other people that I really care about and that I know are smart, who have different views. Yes. What do they have to say about this? And thus started the whole deconstruction of my political views. And I felt embarrassed to say that it was traumatic, because I was sort of pulling back so far. But the way I describe it is it kind of unraveled my entire identity at the time. Right.
That's right.
It was a feeling of being lost, which I'm heavily involved in the work of Brene Brown. And she says, there's grief in that. There's grief in that feeling of feeling lost.
Yeah. Brene Brown, Glennon Doyle, these people, and
Rob Bell is another one.
Rob Bell. Yeah. Anne Lamott, others like that are all speaking along the same lines, where the reason why some people criticize them so harshly is because they're outside of the status quo, or outside of what's normally accepted. Sure, they have their followings and everything, but what they're saying is pretty radical, where you question authority in any form, whether it's in a person or in an institution or in a text. or in norms. Anything that's authoritative is questioned.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I like to jump in the deep end. It's just what I do when I figure that you
time.
do.
Let's just do it.
Let's not waste time. Big talk, not small talk. Well, and I was watching like most of your TikToks, and you have a series, I think maybe it was a handful of months back, where you talked about spiritual abuse. And I don't feel like I have had that, although, there are some things that were conditioned onto me where now I'm like, whew, that was heavy and really made an impact. But can you describe, for someone listening who might be in their own deconstruction process and might not have a place to talk about it a lot, so they're not sure, can you sort of describe what spiritual abuse might look like? Give us some examples.
Yeah. So it can range, in my opinion, anything from sexual assault. And if anybody's reading the news these days, the Southern Baptist Convention is going through a very difficult time, justly so, because hundreds and hundreds of reports of sexual assault by pastors on their congregants, their members, was buried and hidden and concealed by the Southern Baptist Convention. And so it can be something as severe as that, but it can also go to the other end of the spectrum where it's just emotional kind of abuse or psychological abuse, where you're controlled, manipulated, coerced into hiding a part of yourself, or feeling forced to do something you're uncomfortable with, or gaslighting, all these things. So it can be, I don't want to say mild, because it's not mild. But
yeah, I would say it's a spectrum.
It is certainly a spectrum from, emotional abuse, where you're shamed and guilted and made afraid every day, to sexual assault and worse. So that's spiritual abuse. It used to be, people are like, what's spiritual abuse? Like it's some kind of a strange thing, but now it's actually a recognized form of therapy where people experience PTSD, but it might be now post-religious stress disorder, where people need to recover from a very intense religious upbringing.
Right. Yeah. I have a dear friend who is experiencing that right now. And I'm thinking about the entire spectrum and thinking about some of the things that I was told. And I remember being very young and asking, so I grew up in the 80s when, do you remember those commercials with, I think it was Sally Struthers, when they were getting donations for children in Africa.
Right.
And they were awful. Like these, just, watching these children starve to death. And I was probably, it was elementary school, and a sensitive child, and crying and seeing those commercials and asking my mom, like, if God loves us so much, why do bad things like that happen? Why doesn't he feed these children? Why are there, murders, and why do people hurt animals? And she said, there is so much tragedy and on this earth because of sinners.
Yeah.
And I was like, so it's my fault? Like I took that on as I am such a bad person for lying to my mom about, eating the candy that she told me not to eat, that is why there are children starving in Africa. Like I interpreted it that way.
Right.
And that's like one of the worst things I can remember, which is far less egregious than some things that other people experienced. But I have several examples like that and this is no blame and shame to my mom. Like, she grew up Catholic, like that's what they believed. So Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers inline and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/noise, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/noise to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/noise. It's hard to find a great mentor who can help me level up. My dream mentor, Shonda Rhimes. So I was really excited when I heard she has a class on Masterclass. With Masterclass, you can learn from the best to become your best. Masterclass is the only streaming platform where you can learn and grow with over 200 plus of the world's best. For just $10 a month, an annual membership with Masterclass gets you unlimited access to every instructor. And you can access Masterclass on your phone, computer, smart TV, or even in audio mode. I'm always looking for ways to be a better writer, so I took Shonda Rhimes' screenwriting class. It helped me gain concrete technical advice, including structuring, the writing process, and with shows under her belt like Grey's Anatomy and Bridgerton, it was so helpful. Plus, every new membership comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Don't wait another moment to start your learning journey with Masterclass. Right now, our listeners get an additional 15% off any annual membership at masterclass.com/Andrea. That's 15% off at masterclass.com/Andrea. Masterclass.com/Andrea. I'm assuming that my story is not uncommon.
No, that's the standard
standard stuff.
It's not superficial. It's a very, very deep issue, and it goes back in theology. It's called theodicy, the study of theodicy, where how can there be a God and when there's the presence of evil or there's suffering or God is silent or whatever. These are very, very serious issues that people struggle with. And so often people make a choice. Okay, there must not be a God. Or the other choice is there is a God there, and other explanations are we deserve it, or we're causing it, or all kinds of explanations. But they're all guesses, in my opinion.
It's all just make it up. It's all just made up.
Yeah, because we don't know.
Right? We don't.
No, we don't.
That's the type of stuff that I used to think when I was probably like middle school age. Like, how do you know? Was there a literal burning bush that spoke? Was it Moses? Spoke to Moses, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, no, it's a metaphor. You know what I'm hearing? And then I'm like, I am so confused. I just remember being utterly confused. And then when I would ask questions, I would be even more confused than I was, or the questions were typically not warm and fuzzy.
Right. So like your show has a lot to do with creativity. And this is one of the things. I'm an artist. I draw cartoons every day. I
love your cartoons, by the way. They're so great.
Very much. And creativity for me is what freedom looks like. And religion often dampens creativity because religion also isn't all that great about promoting freedom. So it's all connected. And so with my cartoons and so on, I'm trying to break that barrier and trying to break those handcuffs on people that people feel where, because of their religion, they can't express themselves as they truly are. They can't be truly authentic, and therefore they can't be truly creative. Right. And what we're seeing now more and more out there, that a lot of creativity is happening by people who are ex-religious or ex-evangelical or ex-Lutheran or ex-Mormon or, deconstructing or whatever. They're exploding with creativity because it's been bottled up for so long.
Yeah, I believe that. Well, and kind of switching gears, you had a video where you were talking about, and I'm going to totally misquote you, so I won't even try, but I think someone had asked you specifically, like, what do you believe? Like, what are your specific beliefs? And you said something like that you don't like to answer that. So can you talk about that a little bit? Because I find myself curious. And I remember when I first started following Rob Bell, I was like actively searching for what is it exactly that you believe, Mr. Bell? And he doesn't really either talk about it. So can you tell us about that?
Well, I do it. It's very intentional because I'm not trying. A lot of people saying, "Oh, you're I forget the word, but hiding or you're weaseling your way around or whatever." But actually, it's because I believe it's up to each one of us to find out what is true. And for me, your personal freedom is what's most important to me. I think freedom is the driving engine of my life, me to be personally free and authentic and to find out for myself. And so I remember some years ago, I wasn't young, I wasn't old either, but a friend of mine said to me, "Why are you always looking for a father figure?" And it was that came to me at a time in my life where I was really, really intensely searching for what was true and looking all around for the answers and reading books and talking to people and mentors and gurus, not just Christian, but also Buddhist, atheist, philosophers, quantum physicists, everything, just trying to find the answer. And that, when he said, "Why are you always looking for a father figure?" I realized right then and there, I need to, with courage, embrace who I am, where I am, take the steering wheel of my own life, become the captain of my own ship, the master of my own destiny, and stop looking for permission from other people to be who I am, to believe what I believe, and do what I want. And that was a huge transition for me. And a lot of people who grow up in religion and so on were so scared about believing something wrong or saying something wrong, or, or being punished or judged or corrected or rebuked for it. That's just the genre, the environment, the culture in which we grow up in. But for me, I broke away from that. I just that's right. I don't need permission. I can be me, and I can believe what I want to believe. I can do my own searching and find my own answers, and not keep looking to some authority figure or guru to provide it for me.
I love that you do that. And I also think it's helpful because I imagine that people who find your work and follow it, and other people who are talking about deconstruction are feeling lost. Yes. And they're kind of, and maybe they're desperate, maybe they're just searching for what to believe. And really it's not up to you. And because we tend to put experts on pedestals, and it's like, oh, well, if David says, that we don't believe in the hard rules of organized religion or Christianity or what have you, but instead it's this, and this, then I should believe in this, and this. But instead you're giving people an invitation really to figure out what works for them.
Yeah, it's to assume autonomy, self-determining independence. That's a huge thing that at some point in our lives we have to embrace and manifest and express. We have to accept the fact that we are free and autonomous. And so I'm not your guru, and I'm constantly resisting that. I get questioned that every day. Do you believe in Jesus? Do you believe, in God? Do you, please tell me how to do this or that. And, if it's, I sometimes answer those questions, but most often I'm like, well, what do you think? What would you do? Or what would you believe in this situation? And then own it. Own it.
I think it changes from day to day too. I don't know about you, but
yeah, but see, that's okay. I live on a river. And it's a huge river. It's called the Kennebecasis River. It's a Mi'kmaq name, the tribe's land we live on. It's made up of many, many streams. So if I go down to the Kennebecasis River and put a cup in, I could point to the cup and say, there's the Kennebecasis River, but it's not really.
Right.
It's a part of the Kennebecasis River, and it changes every day, every hour, every day. It changes. Sometimes there's waves. Sometimes it's like glass. Sometimes it's flowing this way. Sometimes it looks like it's flowing the other way because it's close to the ocean and it's a little bit tidal. But there's many, many streams, and we're like that.
Yeah,
we're made up of many streams, and we don't have to be one thing. Like Lutheran, for example, and everything that Lutherans believe. We can be who we are, and all kinds of streams are flowing through us, and we just notice them as they flow by. But we're always who we are, and that never, that's something we can count on.
That's such a beautiful metaphor. I love that. In your opinion, does organized religion ever work? Is it ever a good thing? Have you seen it work?
Well, yeah, I'm not an enemy of religion. I just like to see it function in a healthy manner. That's all. That's all I ask.
Yeah.
One of the greatest assets and values of organized religion is community. I think it's number one advantage over everything else. Like, so when I left the ministry and the church in 2010, that was the biggest pain point for me, was the sudden loss of community. Because when you walk into a church, most churches, when you walk into a church, for example, it could be the same with a mosque or a temple or synagogue or wherever, you're handed community on a platter.
Right.
And all kinds of activities and potlucks and all kinds of support and, friends and everything. And when you leave that, that's all gone. And I have yet to find anything that even comes remotely close to fulfilling that.
Alcoholics Anonymous.
What? Oh,
Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm in recovery, but that has its own spiritual roots.
Yes, it does. And it has its own issues as well. But
absolutely.
I'm not saying the church's form of community that it gives us is necessarily healthy. There's a lot of problems with it. So religion, I grew up in religion. I lived in religion. I was in the deep end. I was like all in for most of my life, almost all of my life. And then I left organized religion in 2010. But I wouldn't be who I am now unless I was who I was then. Right. It all folds in. It all contributes. I compare it to compost, which is half earth and half shit. Half good, half bad.
Gross.
And it all gets folded in together. And that's what I grow out of. So religion served a purpose for me. In a way, I call her my spiritual mother, the church. But in many ways, she is very controlling and bitchy sometimes and really hard to get along with. And demanding and strict and all those things. But I have a lot to be grateful for, even though I also have a lot that I didn't appreciate about it.
Yes, I completely understand that. I'm sure a lot of people listening do too. So that community aspect is really when I had an eye-opening moment when I mentioned before we started talking, I left the church when I was a teenager and had moments where I came back. My first marriage, we got married in the Catholic Church. That was his choice. And it worked out because I had been baptized Catholic. So I guess I was like, I was approved. I got their stamp of approval. Then we got divorced and I had children. And when I had babies was when I started to feel the dogma of, okay, I haven't baptized them yet. And I was nervous of what might happen to them if they passed away without being baptized. And so I brought them, we were living in Oceanside at the time. We're still in San Diego. And I brought them to, I don't know if it was a mega church, but it was definitely like a mini mega church. And I really liked it. I mean, they had like a coffee shop and a bookstore and like great stuff for my kids. And my kids had fun at the Sunday school and they drew pictures of Jesus. And I was like, okay, I could do, and my husband's an atheist. So it was just my second husband. So it was just me and my kids. And I remember sitting in the congregation and listening to the sermon and feeling that cognitive dissonance of like, I love this, but something is wrong. It's like being on a first date with someone and you're like, oh, something is off and I don't know what it is. Yeah. And it took me, I think we attended for a couple of months for me to realize it wasn't the religion I was missing. It was the community. Right. I wanted, because my first marriage had fallen apart and I was such a part of that community. And then, although I loved my new husband, I didn't have the same friends anymore. And I was basically starting my life over and I had these two babies and I was lonely and just questioning. I was having a bit of a 34-year-old crisis. I wasn't quite midlife, but it was such a huge epiphany. And which brings me to my next question for you around dogma is I went through a period of years, gosh, David, probably 5 to 7 years. And it wasn't intense, but it was definitely like the whisper of, Andrea, what if you're wrong? What if, and I know that this is from years of indoctrination growing up. What if and I would have these, images of dying and going to the pearly gates. And they're like, well, sorry, you can't come in because and worrying about my children's salvation. And it just,
So do you have any advice? And I'm past that now, and I have so much more freedom now. And it's like, okay, it's all just made up. Like, I really, truly believe that. Do you have any advice for someone listening who might be in that similar situation of, it's kind of like this limbo of, not quite to the other side yet, not where they used to be, but sort of in this little bit of a dogmatic fear?
I have definitely been in that place where my paycheck ran out before the next one got here. Life doesn't happen bi-weekly, so why should payday? The money you earn can be in your hands today with Earnin. Earnin is an app that gives you access to your pay as you work, up to $100 per day or up to $750 per pay period. Just download the Earnin app and verify your paycheck. Then access up to $100 a day as you work and leave an optional tip. Any money you access plus tips are automatically repaid from your next paycheck. You can use Earnin to pay for a girls' night out, a last-minute gift for a loved one, or even summer camp for the kids. Make Earnin a part of your financial routine and join Earnin's over 3.5 million customers who say things like, when I think about Earnin, I think about financial stability, security. It gives me a lot of peace of mind. Download Earnin today, spelled EARNIN, in the Google Play or Apple App Store. When you download the Earnin app, type in noise under podcast when you sign up. It really, really helps the show. Noise under podcast. Subject to your available earnings, location, daily max, and pay period max. See earnin.com/TOS for details. Earnin is a financial technology company, not a bank. Bank products are issued by Evolve Bank and Trust, member FDIC. Fast forward to the end of 2024 and think about your goals. What can you do right now to give yourself the best chance of succeeding? If you want to learn a new language, you absolutely should get Babbel. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babbel's designed by real people for real conversations. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Now it's so easy to speak simple conversation phrases with the guy that takes care of my lawn without having to consult language apps. Here's a special limited time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/noise. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/noise, spelled BABBEL.com/noise. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Yeah, I do a lot of cartoons about that because it's very real. I remember.
I was going to ask you, like, if you experienced that.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I remember the day I quit the ministry and the church, and I was lying on my bed. Lisa was working; she's a nurse, my wife, and I was lying there, and I just felt this cold sweat. Like, what have I done? Like, what if I'm wrong? Like, and you were right. That was a layover from my religious upbringing. It's kind of like we had a children's book that we read to our kids. It's Inuit. The author is Inuit and a northern indigenous people. And it's all about these monsters. I can't remember the Inuit names, but monsters that lived under the ice. And they would tell the children these stories. And the whole point was to scare the children from going onto thin ice in the spring during the melt, or too early. That's basically the function of fear in religion. It's to scare us into, from a positive viewpoint, to be safe. From a negative viewpoint, to just stay here, like within these limitations. And so what I encourage people to do is take the steps to eventually get to the place. So what if you're wrong, if you believe in God or not? I'm not saying whether I do or not. I'm not saying whether you do or not. What I'm saying is, let's say you still might believe in God and you have that fear. You need to get to that place where you would believe that no God in their right mind is going to punish somebody because of a thought forever, in fire, forever, separated from them. What kind of a God creates hells? Right. So most people I know who've deconstructed get to that point where they believe God, if God is love, then he wouldn't create, let's say they wouldn't create a hell or cause somebody to suffer forever in a burning lake of fire. Like, this just doesn't make sense to me. And you get to that point, and eventually, if you do go even further and become an atheist, those echoes of the threat of punishment eventually become like just a whisper. And then, they eventually fade, just like your experience and just like mine. They eventually fade away so that they, no longer have an impact or effect in the same way. You can remember without reliving, but I'm a mature man. Still, sometimes the dark freaks me out. Like when I'm in a weird place and I'm walking upstairs in the dark and I'm feeling my way in the cellar, it's kind of scary, but it's all, the whole thing about monsters and everything under the stairs. It just has a way of sticking to you sometimes. Yeah. And it's the same with the threat of punishment and all that. It eventually goes.
I would agree with that, attest to that from my own experience, that it took time. And what also helped me is talking to people who had been through it before, just like anything else.
Right.
And I have friends who their experience is more traumatic and impactful than mine. And they've sought out therapists who specialize in religious trauma and deconstruction. And so, which they found really helpful, which I'm so glad that niche exists now. It's so absolutely necessary. Well, tell us a little bit more about your art. Were you going to be an artist? Was that the original plan?
No, I mean, I never remember. What am I trying to say? I've drawn my whole life.
Okay.
I've always been an artist, like ever since I can remember. I watched my dad painting in our home and I was always drawing, and sometimes cartoons. I learned how to paint. I do watercolor paintings and all kinds of other drawings. And I did that. I went to a Bible college in the States. I'm from Canada, but I went to Bible college in the States. That's where I met my wife, Lisa, who's from Alabama. Then we went to Boston to seminary, went to another seminary at McGill University in Montreal. I got ordained. I went the whole ministry route, and I painted on the side.
Okay.
But in 2005, I started a blog, Naked Pastor, which basically means a pastor who's real. That's all it means. I once in a while would show my paintings. And anyway, I love a really good cartoon. There was a cartoonist I really admired he challenged himself to draw a cartoon every day. And I thought, well, why don't I try that? And I tried my first cartoon, and I thought, I'm going to try to draw one every day. I thought I might last 30 days. Here I am doing it 17 years later, still drawing a cartoon every day, pretty much. It just stuck, so that in 2010, when I left the ministry, I went and taught at university for a little bit. But then in 2012, I decided, I'm going to try and make Naked Pastor a full-time job. And I put all my effort into that. And that's what I've been doing since 2012. So 10 years I've been doing Naked Pastor full-time. And basically, if you ask, have you heard of David Hayward? Most people will say no. But Naked Pastor, more people have heard of Naked Pastor. And my cartoons are pretty popular. They get shared a lot, and some of them go viral. So I'm really happy about that. I'm really excited about it. And even to the point where I have a best of cartoon book coming out this summer. So
congratulations.
I'm really excited about it. It's my 10th book too. So
are they all about religion, or are they all kinds of different topics?
All kinds, mostly to do with deconstruction. One has to do with money, though. I say money is spiritual because I had to wrestle with my religious views about money. Sure. And so I wrote that into a book, Money is Spiritual. I do one about marriage, Till Doubt Do Us Part, When Changing Beliefs Change Your Marriage. And other ones are about deconstruction and stuff like that. But this one's my best of. So I have thousands of cartoons, and I had to choose 125 to fit into this book. So it was quite a challenge, but yeah, it's coming out in July.
That's awesome. That's great. We will. So this theme will come out around there. So we'll make sure and put that in the show notes. before we close up, is there anything based on our conversation or even otherwise that you want to make sure that gets said that I didn't ask?
Yeah, I would say to your people who are listening, what I found really, really helpful for me, in my deconstruction, even though my theological deconstruction started way, way back decades ago, my deconstruction from church is more recent, but and religion, it's been quite a journey. But what I would encourage your guests, if any of this, is hitting home for them, is to do it creatively. Like that's the whole part of this deconstruction thing, is you becoming more authentically you. And so like write your honest feelings and thoughts in your journal, or write poetry, or draw pictures, or paint paintings, or do stuff that, or creative dance, or
interpretive dance. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah. Like do things that are an expression of your creativity. And I found it was very cathartic for me. I'm not only helping other people who identify with my art and relate to it, but it really is a cathartic process of creating through your journey, and it has a way of exercising your own personal demons. So I would just encourage your listeners to try that as a way.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. I think art and creativity is so linked to healing and growth in our evolution.
Could I give an example? Like
please do.
In 2012, it was 2010 when I left the ministry. In 2012, though, I sat down one Sunday afternoon with pen and pencil and paper, and I just started drawing. I had no idea what I was drawing. I just started sort of sketching. And I ended up with a drawing of a little girl holding up a teddy bear to a big, huge grizzly bear towering over her. And my wife's like, "What's that?" Because it was so out of character for my style. And I'm like, I don't know. I just felt it just kind of came to me. And for the next 2 years, I drew this girl or young woman out in the wilds, facing danger, but free. I drew a total of 59 of them. And I wrote a reflection for each one, like a meditation. And I called it The Liberation of Sophia. That's another one of my books. But halfway through the process, I realized I got really emotional. This one, when I was drawing this one called The Cave, where she's standing in front of the mouth of a cave, and it's dark, and there's spider webs, and there's vines, and it looks very scary, and she's trying to decide whether or not to go in. And we all know the cave represents going into our deeper selves. I realized I was drawing my journey away from religion and that oppressive lifestyle, and me trying to figure out how to live free. And it was profound. And so the whole Sophia series was actually me drawing it out. Like it was kind of like lancing a wound, like a bite, and lancing the poison. And so Sophia came out as an entire book, and that was a whole creative process. So being creative in the middle of your journey, no matter how difficult it is, can be very, very healing.
Yeah, I agree with that. Mine is writing, either poetry or just like free writing. And I was mentioning to someone else on this theme that there are times I don't even remember writing. So I do think that it can become like this sort of, I don't know if I'd call it an out-of-body experience, but definitely we're using parts of ourselves and our brain and our soul and our spirit that go largely untapped.
Yeah. Some people said, were you channeling, And I'm like, I'm not there.
Maybe.
I was channeling my deepest self, though.
Yeah.
And to me, it was like an alien, because I didn't know that part of myself. She came out as a woman in the wilderness named Sophia. So it was very interesting.
I love that. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That's so interesting. We'll definitely have all of your social links in the show notes, and you're at nakedpastor.com. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah. And listeners, thank you so much for your time. You know how much I appreciate that you spend it with my guests and me. And remember, it's our life's journey to make ourselves better humans and our life's responsibility to make the world a better place. Bye for now. Hi there. Swinging back by to say one more thing. You know how I'm always giving advice over here on the show and on social media. And a couple of those things is that I'm always telling you to ask for what you want, be clear about it, and also ask for help. So I am taking a dose of my own medicine, and I'm going to do that right now. It would be the absolute best and mean the world to me if you reviewed and subscribed to this show, Make Some Noise podcast, on whatever podcast platform of your choice. And even more importantly, it would matter so much if you shared this show. Sharing the show is one of the few ways the podcast can grow, and that also gives more women an opportunity to make some noise in their lives. You can do that by taking a screenshot when you're listening on your phone and sharing it in your Instagram or Facebook stories. If you're on Instagram, you can tag me at Hey Andrea Owen, and I try my best to always re-share those and give you a quick thank you DM. And also you can tell your friends and family about it. Tell them what you learned, tell them a really awesome guest that you found on the show that you started following. Whatever it is, I appreciate so much you sharing about this show.
I'd like to introduce you to the Minimalist Moms podcast. It's hard enough being a mom, and the last thing you need is stress from too much stuff and an overcrowded schedule. For too long, I lived with the mindset that bigger was better, and the more I added to my life, instead of feeling better, I felt overwhelmed. It was time for a radical new mindset. Less is more. I'm not into extremes. I didn't throw everything away. My brand of minimalism is more about adding than subtracting. Get rid of the excess to make room for what you love. In other words, it's about living life with purpose. I hope you'll listen in, and my guest and myself can inspire you to think more and do with less. The Minimalist Moms podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts.